there was a deal for 100 years that was signed where Britain promises the support of around $3.6 billion every year in terms of the military support and collaboration in terms of the technology and military technologies.
Starmer has visited Ukraine for the first time since becoming PM. He met President Zelensky in Kyiv and he spoke to journalists a bit earlier.
One of the consequences of this conflict has been to draw NATO more strongly together. It's bigger and stronger than it has been, and we must stand behind Ukraine for as long as it takes. But when we say Ukraine must be in the strongest possible position, that can't be just words. And that's why I've had such intense discussions with President Zelensky now over the months that I've been Prime Minister and will again here in Ukraine.
Well, during the visit, there were reports of a drone attack overhead. The PM called it a reminder of what he called Russia's unrelenting aggression. Let's now welcome back to our programme Kira Rudik, who's leader of the Holos Party in the Ukrainian parliament. Welcome back to the show, Kira.
Hello, John, and thank you so much for having me.
Always a pleasure. What are your thoughts, Kira, on this visit by the British Prime Minister and the promise of enduring British support?
Well, it was not only a promise. There was a deal for 100 years that was signed where Britain promises the support of around $3.6 billion every year in terms of the military support and collaboration in terms of the technology and military technologies, right? The visit right now is extremely important, not only from the motivational side and general sign of support, but it is basically helping Ukraine to gather the international forces before Donald Trump takes in office. And when we understand that there could be some discussions about the negotiation and we need to be at the strongest possible position for the discussions about discussions.
And the President Zelensky, has been now for a little while actively contemplating the possibility of negotiations and some kind of troops and possibly friendly troops friendly to Ukraine guarding what might become a sort of frozen front line. What are your feelings about that?
Well, I have more questions than answers about that. The first question is, would these troops be armed? And if so, does it make sense to send those arms to Ukraine right now when we desperately need it, rather than wait until the troops come, right? Like if we never actually asked for the troops to come, we were asking for the constant military support so we can do the job ourselves. So that's the key point. Second question still is, what happens when the first international soldier that is coming here under the peace mission would be killed by the Russian drone or at the battlefield? What would happen then? And I think right now, democratic leaders do not have a good answer to that, because we have seen a couple of times when Russian missiles were crossing NATO borders in Romania, in Poland, and there was no feedback except of being constantly concerned, et cetera, et cetera. The missile did not mean to hit the NATO state. So I think position where you are not ready to answer to the aggression is kind of a very weak position and weakening, and showing Russia that the area where they can push is expanding. This is why talking about international forces here, we can only when there is a decision that this is the red line, and if Russia crosses that, then the feedback would be from all the NATO states. And from what we see right now, this is something that everyone is trying to avoid.
Yes. I think the question you raised there is a very relevant one. I'm going to be pursuing it if I can a bit later on in the course of today's programme. And I think you make the point, which I want to hear an answer to, which is, what do you think should happen if there is a truce, if a coalition of the willing, because it would not be a NATO force, if a coalition of willing countries, conceivably involving France, conceivably Britain, was manning a front line in a frozen conflict? Would they be engaged in fighting Russia if they broke the agreement? Because there'd be deep worries about that. And I suspect the British government is as worried as anyone about the implication.
Well, there is another angle of that, right? Is everybody is thinking about the war in Ukraine as the war that they know, like Second World War or the wars in Afghanistan or something else. But it's actually very different. And the main difference is that right now the drone usage is the largest in the history. And it's very hard, if possible, would be to define like where this drone came from, and everybody will be blaming each other, and that creates even harder situations where the attacks will continue even if there is a ceasefire.
Yeah, it would be very difficult to police, difficult to supervise, and at times understand even what is going on that front line. I have to leave it there for the moment. I'll be looking at this question a bit later on, as I say. But for now, Kira Rudik of the Holos Party in Kyiv. Thank you for coming on, Kira.
So here we have the weight, and it's written down on each shell. Then they are put in the compartment in order of growing weight and fired accordingly. So the discrepancy is minimal between each.
Сюди. А він нам дав. Що буде? Це не взяти.